Fide.email, you don't need to compromise faith to participate in the modern world. Instead of pushing ads and invasive practices that conflict with Catholic values, we built Fide to reclaim technology for Christendom. When you use Fide.email, you declare your commitment to technology that defends Christian tradition. Join Fide.email today and use technology to advance Christendom.
If you're looking for a sign of hope for the conclave that begins this coming Wednesday evening, then you might want to pay attention. The worst elements seem nervous. They're not nervous, to be honest, that Cardinal Sarah or Burke or even Pizzaballa are being talked about as credible, conservative, or traditionally minded possible popes, but because signs point to the next pontiff possibly being insufficiently Francis-like or worse for their taste, meaning they want somebody like Francis. Depending on how you read things, it doesn't look like they'll get their way. We'll find out probably by the end of the week. Signs still point to someone the media is painting as a moderate becoming pope, such as Cardinal Parolin or now Cardinal Prevost being a point to rally around. Reportedly, Parolin, I saw last night on X, Italian sources claiming that he is out there rallying the last few votes he needs. We'll see. On the flip side of that, last week it was reported that Cardinal Parolin had a health scare. Then the Vatican said, no, he did not. Now, J.D. Flynn says, according to his sources, yes, he did. And around and around and around we go. But Cardinal Parolin nor Cardinal Prevost are moderates. Parolin's evils are well known. And as for the American, Cardinal Prevost, he's one of the men most directly responsible for canceling Bishop Joseph Strickland. So don't celebrate if he is the one the Cardinals choose. And don't fall for their gaslighting that he's a moderate. Yeah, he won't get up on stage and call you a rigid indie-trist or something, but he's no moderate. Here are some signs for your consideration. We go here to, first, I want to say hello to Alone in Bangkok, who became a channel member. Thank you very much. It is greatly appreciated. Channel members always get a free super chat once a month. That's a perk YouTube gives you for any channel you're a member of. So please feel free to use it. Here is your first sign. I've covered this story before. Won't go into detail today, but the headline is from El Pais. Cardinal Cobo, Francis's measures are irreversible. The next pope will have to embrace what he brought. The Archbishop of Madrid advocates continuing to open the church, as the late pope did, in a world, quote, with diverse cultures where God is sometimes not present. And when you see them speaking like this, there's always the accompaniment angle. There's always the God presented in a universalist kind of way. There's many valid paths to God kind of way, which directly conflicts with the magisterium, tradition, capital T tradition, and of course the words of Jesus Christ. So again, that's what they want, though. They want a church that will go along to get along with the world. A lot of this kind of signaling has been happening for more modernist bishops and cardinals. They tell us that it's not that we need to continue Francis's work, it's that we have no choice. The church must keep moving forward, and they present this in a number of different ways. Outside the conclave, one American bishop has spoken up and let you know what many American bishops are themselves saying. We go here to AZ News. So for those of you watching this in the state of Arizona, headline: Phoenix bishop says this kind of pope is what the church needs. I don't want us to go backward. Backward. You're going to hear that phrase a lot in the coming days. As reports come from Rome of what the bishops are deciding, going to hear talk of one faction that wants to move forward and continue the work, and the other who wants to go backward, and how dangerous it is to go backward. Now, I would suggest if you're driving somewhere and you take a wrong turn, sometimes going backward is what you need to get back on the right path. But these, of course, they don't believe they've taken a wrong turn at all. They believe the church has finally taken the correct turn. Here's what the bishop has to say. Quote, the Holy Roman Catholic Church will have a new man at the helm once the papal conclave chooses Pope Francis' successor. Bishop John Dolan of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Phoenix knows what kind of person he would like in the position seen by the world's 1.4 billion Catholics as the earthly representative of Jesus Christ. Somebody who is as tender as a dad, Dolan told the Arizona Republic, noting the term pope means father in Italian, Spanish, and some other Romance languages. Pope Francis, who died April 21st of a stroke and heart failure at 88, was of such a nature, Dolan argued. The late pontiff's plain spokenness on issues of importance to Catholics made him an approachable figure among the faithful, the 62-year-old bishop who met the Pope twice said. That's what a pope should be, Dolan said. He was quick to clarify he had no favorite and would have confidence in whoever wins the majority of votes cast by cardinals in the conclave that begins May 7th in Vatican City. He did, however, point to two cardinals who have surfaced as potential successors. Cardinals Peter Codwo Appia Turkson. So there's another Peter for those of you who are looking for Peter the Roman. And Luis Antonio Joaquim Tagle. Please give us Tagle. If we have to have a bad pope, please make it Tagle. At least we'll be entertained. He has been at the center of speculative conversations. Both men, Dolan said, would be of his, Francis's, mind. Dolan mentioned Turkson's role within the Vatican on the environment. Pope Francis regarded addressing the thermometer problem wrought by human activity, put an asterisk next to that, in religious terms, and Turkson, 76, was integral to papal messaging on the worldwide issue. This is an all-embracing moral imperative to protect and care for both creation, our garden home, and the human person who dwells herein, and to take action to achieve this, Turkson said in 2015. He's opposed to making it illegal the James Martin stuff in his native country of Ghana, Dolan added. And it goes on to tell you about how great Tagle is. That's who they want. Again, if we have to have a really bad pope, at least make it Tagle so at least we'll have a good laugh while we're between the tears. Now, we're seeing open politicking at the conclave. All of it against the rules set out by John Paul II and done now at this point by all sides if the reporting is even close to accurate. And you're going to see some of that here. The gloves seem to have come off, and one very bad cardinal is worried, and he expresses that worry in a way that sounds just absolutely awful. And he has kind of a history of saying things in an awful way. So we go to LifeSite with this headline. Cardinal Casper says papal conclave may stall if conspiratorial group blocks vote. The German cardinal suggested that a lack of familiarity among the cardinal electors and conspiratorial groups could delay the outcome of the papal conclave. Now, I'm going to remind you that the man on screen here is a member of the St. Gallen group, so it's pretty rich coming from him. But then again, he might know what such groups look like since he was part of the St. Gallen group himself. Takes one to know one in this case. From the article, quote, Cardinal Walter Casper has said that the upcoming conclave could take longer than the previous two and reiterated his support for the continuation of Pope Francis's agendas. In an interview with the German Catholic outlet Dom Radio, Casper was asked how long he thinks the upcoming conclave will last. Well, you can't say that at all, the 92-year-old cardinal said. The last conclaves have all gone relatively quickly. This time, many of the cardinals don't know each other, which could cause a delay. Or if a conspiratorial group with a one-third majority wants to elect someone most people don't want, but still has this one-third majority, then you have to start all over again, he continued. That can delay things a lot. That is a reference to conservative cardinals, by the way. The conclaves that elected Pope Benedict XVI in 2005 and Pope Francis in 2013 were notably brief. Both took only 2 days and fewer than 5 ballots. Casper was part of the infamous St. Gallen group, a group of high-ranking heterodox clerics who opposed Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger's election to the papacy in 2005 and reportedly plotted to elect Jorge Mario Bergoglio as pope. The group had multiple meetings in St. Gallen, Switzerland between 1995 and 2006. Casper was a voting cardinal in the 2005 and 2013 conclaves, but has now exceeded the age limit of 80 and will therefore not be able to participate in the upcoming conclave. He stated his wish that the next pope would carry on the legacy of Francis. Quote, I'd personally like the new pope to continue on the foundations laid by Pope Francis. Francis has taken many initiatives, opened many doors, and allowed many questions to be asked. The fact that we can discuss these issues at all without being censored has created a different new atmosphere. Quote. He's one of those, he takes the cake. He's really, Casper is the gift that keeps on giving. He was the man instrumental to Amoris Laetitia becoming the law in the church. For give you an idea of a history lesson. And he got the worst ideas from that from the Eastern Orthodox. He's been trying to get divorce, communion for divorced and remarried, inspired by them in the Catholic Church since the 1980s. And he finally got his way into Francis. Eldridge Yorkshire with the super chat. Thank you. What do you think of the Iraqi Cardinal Raphael? He's conservative on the James Martin stuff and marriage and wants to update the liturgy to vernacular languages. Don't know much about him personally. Maybe that means he'll step out on the loggia. Most of the attention you'll notice to cardinals at least from people talking about this stuff, is to people you see talked about frequently online. That's why you see Cardinal Sarah's name come up so much. And oftentimes it's somebody you don't think of. Even the media often gets this wrong. In 2005, nobody had heard of Jorge Bergoglio, but he came like that close to becoming Pope. If there's enough pushback on the James Martin stuff, somebody like him could very well be the next Pope. But reportedly, like half of the bishops or something are at least sympathetic to, if not members of that crowd themselves. Not necessarily violating their vows or anything, but unlikely to push back on James Martin's work. It's why James Martin frequently will just travel the United States and never get pushback from most dioceses for giving talks that violate church teaching. He's got a lot of sympathizers in the hierarchy anywhere he wants to go in the West. Now, we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing open politicking here, and the conventional wisdom is that the conclave will be short because it'll be the last three conclaves were short, right? That's not necessarily going to be the case in this time, although, again, conventional wisdom says it is. I started telling you that Parolin has reportedly, over the weekend, already garnered virtually all the votes he needs, which would mean on the first ballot, there will be the symbolic, I'm going to vote for my friends, but most people will vote still for the candidates they're going to support, but not enough to put anyone over the top. And then they'll close ranks the next day. By Friday, they'd have a pope elected. If that theory is true, we shall see. Again, we are in the fog of the propaganda war, and you'll see what I'm talking about on this. On the other side of the Casper side of the Casper faction, we're seeing a lot of movement. So let me give you some examples here. 1 Peter 5 posted this to X, saying, moments ago, several cardinals were seen entering Cardinal Burke's apartment off the Via dei Congiuli. I can't speak Italian, and I'm not going to ruin the language, but they were seen entering his apartment. The princes of the church are not yet locked in the Sistine Chapel, but the conclave has definitely begun. Again, they are politicking, and everybody seems at this point to be breaking the rules, or at least coming up as close to the line on breaking the rules as laid out by John Paul II and reiterated by Benedict and Francis on politicking at the conclave. But new names are starting to show up too, as moderates and as alternatives to for the progressive wing. Peter Kwasniewski posted this on his Facebook and on X. He says, Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline is now considered a leading candidate to succeed Francis at the coming conclave. Vatican insiders have told LifeSite News that he will be the next pope. And Edward Penton and Diane Montagna's Cardinalium Collegio Recensio states that he is allegedly Pope Francis's favorite cardinal to succeed him. Thus, understanding Aveline's theology has become an urgent task. In the first 3 parts of this series, it's a link to an article. Maybe I'll go over it in more detail tomorrow, depending on what happens today in the news. He says, we examined how Aveline systematically reinterprets the Catholic religion. Francis's favorite, who's picking up steam apparently, every day it's a new name, right? But part 1, he reimagines the role of false religions in salvation. He redefines the universality of Christ's mediation to include those outside the church. He reconfigures the church's mission around dialogue rather than conversion. And each, as Dr. Kwasniewski says, each of these moves represents an inversion of Catholic doctrine. Taken together, they constitute a system of apostasy. The Third Secret of Fatima, according to every cardinal who read it, and every person who claimed to be in the room, Malachi Martin and others, when it was read, said the same thing. They couldn't give you too many details about it, sworn to secrecy, but they all confirmed the same detail, that it details an apostasy in the church led from the top. Here's your candidate for continuing that work. An inversion of Catholic doctrine taken as an apostasy. In place of the true religion, Aveline installs a new model which retains some of the vocabulary of Catholicism, while emptying it of its content. It speaks of Christ, the church, and salvation, but reinterprets each in the image of modernity, grounded not in revelation, but in sentiment and politics. And that is the man himself. His name is now listed as one of the front runners, and he was Francis's personal favorite. He's not the only one to talk about this kind of thing happening either. We have John Henry Weston posted this to X. He's the one who runs LifeSite for those who don't know. From inside the pre-conclave meetings with cardinals, it is suggested that Cardinal Robert Prevost is the moderate of choice. Think about this. As the head of the congregation of bishops, he presided over the removal of America's best bishop, Bishop Strickland, and the elevation of the heretic Cardinal Robert McElroy, who is now posted to Washington, D.C. Some moderate. Now, to be fair, we'll try to be fair to Cardinal Prevost. He may have helped preside over a lot of that, but Cupich was one of Francis's top men in the United States. He was literally like the voice for Francis among the cardinals. It is fair to assume that Cupich was at least as influential as Prevost was in this, if not more. Now, a lot of this, though, you'll notice the language being employed here by everybody observing. Moderate, conservative, liberal. It's easy to default to that kind of language, but it's also not accurate. This complicated by the fact that politicking has begun and we have to default to shared language we can communicate these ideas to. At the end of the day, these labels don't fit neatly. And one cardinal, I know next to nothing about his politics, but he's not wrong in this assessment. He says, this was posted by a user on X to an article. We're not going to go over the article, but this is Swedish Cardinal Anders Borealis of Stockholm warned against categorizing the cardinals along political and ideological lines. And that is absolutely correct. It's hard not to use that language, and you're going to have to use some of that language because we don't have anything way of better describing this in shorthand. But I'm going to show you, and again, both Twitter accounts here I'm going to show you. I'm not calling out either one. I like the counts on them. We're mutuals as far as I know, at least on the first one. But I think this is a wrong take. This has been floating around for a couple of weeks now. As talk of a potential conclave in the near future heats up, because this was posted in February, I thought it would be helpful to make a diagram of the current ideological makeup of the College of Cardinals. And here is the least accurate makeup I've seen, and you've seen this image floating around. Liberal, moderately conservative, conservative. This is meant to convey the idea that most of them are conservative, and this is absolutely incorrect anyway, besides the fact that it employs secular language to categorize people. This is a better one, posted by someone called El Conquistador. Here's a realistic way of looking at the current voting members of the College of Cardinals. So we'll bring this up a little bit bigger. Progressives, 15. Bergoglian Francis pastoralists are the yellow. Okay, now look at that. Peripheries, these are socially conservative, politically progressive. Those are your purples. Meaning socially conservative, they don't like the James Martin stuff. Okay. But boy, do they have a liberation theology view of the world. And when you put this together, you get a very grim picture. And then you get in the blue, your conservatives. These are going to be maybe your Prevosts, maybe as a conservative, maybe. And then you get your traditionalists, and they've got 5 of them. And the thing about this is, I'm reminded, I've brought this one up several times in the last few live streams when the subject is being talked about. Taylor Marshall mentioned this on X, that he looked at the numbers and he would categorize about 18 of the 135 cardinals as traditionally minded. And this is why they're desperately looking for a moderate to counter the Avellines, the Gugaratis, or whoever else tomorrow they'll bring up. Over the weekend, all we heard about in the media, I read a lot of this stuff this weekend, was how great Cardinal Gresh was. Cardinal Gresh is one of the 2 men who ran the Synod on Synodality. He is one of the men most directly responsible for coining the diabolical phrase, the new synodal church. Okay. I don't want any part of the new synodal church. Richard Corrin says, here's my free message. Again, if you're a channel member here or anywhere else, you get a free super chat once a month from YouTube for the channel that you're a member of. Use it. You're paying for it. Use it. But these sort of left-right things, they don't work very well. Once you throw things like, you will have, keep bringing this example up, like I just did a minute ago, a lot of those cardinals are very big on liberation theology. And but also very conservative about morality. How does that work? These idea systems that dominate in the church don't neatly line up to left and right. That's why calling people a moderate and a liberal and a conservative, it comes from a very American and very parliamentarian kind of view of things. And the Catholic Church doesn't line up perfectly with it. But we don't have better language to use. I mean, you run around calling someone a Bergoglian pastoralist. What does that even mean? Okay. It's hard to communicate that to people. But if you say someone, well, the guy's liberal, we understand. It's terrible shorthand, but what do we have a better way of doing it? Now, I'm not alone on this either, noticing that this is just not that helpful. I don't usually cite Bishop Barron positively. I don't have anything really against him. His theology has some is troubling at times. But he posted this. He's been getting a lot of flack lately, and I may cover some of that because he took a job working with the Trump administration, and boy, are people angry about it. So pray for Bishop Robert Barron in this. He says, I am so tired of the silly political analyses of the papal candidates. Where does he stand on immigration? On the thermometer problem? On the poor? Look, there are indeed moral implications of the gospel, but the gospel itself is what truly matters. And the good news is that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead and hence the rightful Lord. What I'm looking for in a pope is a man who firmly believes this and knows how to make it compelling for people today. 100% in agreement with Bishop Barron. I would add the caveat that he stands up and represents that even to the elements, and maybe first and foremost to the elements within the church who don't seem to believe what the church has always said about that. But otherwise, I'm in full agreement with Bishop Robert Barron. I expect most of you are too. These political issues in general, yes, the church has opinions on them. The church has to take a stand on some things. The tradition of Catholic social teaching goes back to Thomas Aquinas, represented in the late 19th century by Pope Leo XIII, using Aquinas as his guide. But that got itself co-opted for some pretty bad purposes in the mid 20th century moving forward. But the church has always had an opinion on geopolitical issues, and they're going to be discussed at the conclave. They have to be. By law, it's logical that they would have to be a topic of discussion. Can the Pope exist how will this Pope lead the church in a populist-driven era in Western politics and in Eastern politics? Pay attention to some of that stuff, what's going on in some other places that we don't typically talk about around here. Populism is on the rise. What does that mean for the church? What does that mean for the church's work with those in the peripheries and things? It's absolutely something they will talk about. How much so? It's up to them. Timmy Keller says Pope Luch, a cartoonish legacy of error. A lot of people love that anime doll. I personally am not a fan, but a lot of people love it. Pope Luch, though. Marmar says May 5th is a feast of Pope St. Pius V, one of the truly great popes. St. Pius V, pray for us, pray for the church. Yes, today is the feast of St. Pius V. Invoke his name for the conclave today in your prayers, please. That's not all the only thing going on, though. A few days ago, I gave you an update. I gave you a story that I felt was compelling, and that was the story of, in the state of Washington, the seal of confession was broken, essentially by act of law. A Catholic governor and some Catholic apostates who were in the legislature finally passed a law requiring the seal of confession to be broken. And the governor cited his Catholic bona fides, his Jesuit priest uncle, and his love for Catholicism as he signed a bill into law that excommunicated himself. He incurred an automatic excommunication because he leveled the tools of Caesar to undermine the church. That law required, if a McCarrick type offense, meaning a priest, a man who is not should under no circumstances have been made a priest, does something to a young person, we'll say, and then they go to confession for it, the seal of confession has to be broken. If a priest who is not of such a type hears someone come into confessional and say the same thing that they did, a private person, that they did something and they confess it, the priest is expected to violate the seal of confession. And if they don't, they'll go to jail. For those who aren't aware, if a priest does that, breaks the seal of confession, they incur automatic excommunication. They're no longer a priest. They're no longer even a Catholic. This can be lifted through confession, I believe, to their bishop or to the Pope. But beyond that, they've lost everything. And so now priests face the choice between jail and standing up for the gospel. Essentially, the choice is jail or excommunication. Which are you going to choose? A good Catholic will say they'll go to jail. And I mention this because we have a response to this. The Bishop of Seattle actually issued a short but compelling response. And it reflects something I've said before. I said when reporting on this. In very few things will you see near universal agreement across the great divide in the church between hardline traditionalists and hardline traditionally minded Catholics who are very conservative on one side, and on the other side, the James Martin types and the hypermodernist Bergoglian types. But you will on one topic at least, and that is the seal of confession. Archbishop Etienne of Seattle posted a letter in response. He was appointed to his post by Pope Francis in 2019. His letter is called Clergy, Answerable to God or State, published yesterday, published May 4th, 2025, to his own website. Here is the text of his letter. I present it to you for your consideration. And if you are a priest in the state of Washington seeing this, I would assume by now you've seen this letter. If not, prayerfully consider what is being asked of you. Here's the Archbishop in his words. Towards the end of this year's legislative session, the Washington State Legislature passed a bill, SB 5375, making all clergy mandatory reporters of grave harm done with no exemptions for the privileged communication between priest and penitent during the sacrament of reconciliation. This means that by Washington state law, Catholic clergy are now required to violate the seal of the sacrament of reconciliation, better known to many as confession. On Friday, May 2nd, 2025, Governor Ferguson signed the bill into law. This weekend at Mass, the first reading was from the Acts of the Apostles. After the apostles were arrested and thrown into jail for preaching the name of Jesus Christ, St. Peter responded to the Sanhedrin, "We must obey God rather than men." See Acts chapter 5, verse 29. This is our stance now in the face of this new law. Catholic clergy may not violate the seal of confession, or they will be excommunicated from the church. All Catholics must know and be assured that their confessions remain sacred, secure, confidential, and protected by the law of the church. The Catholic Church agrees with the goal of protecting children and preventing the worst deeds that can be done to them. The Archdiocese of Seattle remains committed to reporting such acts, working with victim survivors towards healing and protecting all of the most young and vulnerable. Our policies already require priests to be mandatory reporters, but not if this information is obtained during confession. The Catholic Church in the U.S. has been committed to preventing this for many decades, reporting incidences of such to law enforcement and cooperating with civil authorities. In the Archdiocese of Seattle, such efforts began in 1986. While we remain committed to protecting minors and all vulnerable people from this, priests cannot comply with this law if the knowledge of this evil is obtained during the sacrament of reconciliation. Various forms of this bill attempted to provide limited protections for privileged communications, but those accommodations for religious practice prevented this bill from passing in previous legislative sessions. Conversations between the Washington State Catholic Conference staff and legislators in efforts to collaborate on an amicable solution eventually failed this session, ushering this most extreme version of the bill to pass and receive the governor's endorsement. What began as a well-intentioned effort ended in a problematic and unnecessary version of the bill signed into law. Once the approved bill went to the governor for his signature, the bishops of the state of Washington asked for a meeting to discuss our concerns with the governor, who unfortunately did not respond to our request. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution states, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." With this law, the state of Washington is specifically targeting religious conduct by inserting the government into Catholic tradition, namely the highly defined ritual of the sacrament of reconciliation. The state is now requiring priests to violate an essential element of the rite, confidential communication between the priest and penitent in which the absolution of sin is offered. This law also attempts to supersede the Code of Canon Law, which states, quote, "The sacramental seal is inviolable, therefore it is a crime for a confessor in any way to betray a penitent by word or in any other manner or for any reason. And a confessor who directly violates the seal of confession incurs an automatic latae sententia excommunication reserved to the apostolic see." Let's pause here. They have to go to the Pope unless the Pope delegates this to the bishop. That's how serious this is. Let's continue. Once the state asserts the right to dictate religious practices and coerce information obtained within this sacrament, privileged communication, where is the line drawn between church and state? What else may the state now demand the right to know? What other religious practices will it try to legislate? Why is this privileged communication between priest penitent the only one singled out? Why not attorney client, doctor patient, spouses? This new law singles out religion and is clearly both government overreach and a double standard. The line between church and state has been crossed and needs to be walked back. People of every religion in the state of Washington and beyond should be alarmed by this overreach of our legislature and governor. And that is his letter. He invokes the separation of church and state, which is one, not even in the Constitution anyway, and two, not something the Catholic Church has ever actually endorsed. But the question remains, after reading that, will Archbishop Etienne excommunicate Governor Ferguson, a self-described Catholic? Or, to be more clear about it, will he confirm the automatic excommunication Governor Ferguson incurred for harming the church? Because that is exactly what he did. He incurred an automatic excommunication. If the Archbishop is watching, which I doubt, but if one of the people in his chancery are, this needs to be considered. This is an attack on the faith, unlike anything we've seen in recent history in the United States. And it's time to stop letting this happen without pushing back. All that is needed to be done is to simply enforce the standing law. Now, on the secular law side of this, I saw some lawyers chiming in on this over the weekend, and there's a universal agreement that this is going to get laughed at the Supreme Court, because when you read the text of the law, it explicitly targets the clergy and Catholic clergy, again, explicitly. This is a grotesque overreach of American constitutional principles, and the Supreme Court is going to laugh it out of court by at least 6-3. Hopefully, they'll take this case up in the current session. Thank you for the super chat, BYM. It is greatly appreciated. He also said below, curious language from Benedict XVI Declaratio, and a conclave to select the Supreme Pontiff will have to be convoked by those whose competence it is. Why not just by all the cardinals? Because sometimes they like to use unnecessarily wordy language for these things. I kind of mentioned that when I was talking about Cardinal Mueller yesterday, that he gets himself into trouble because he sometimes forgets, it seems, that his public writings are often read by people who are not cardinals and bishops and priests, when it looks like that he's very clearly writing for trained theologians in a lot of his writings. But yes, this needs to be opposed. And I'm hoping Catholic lawyer groups will immediately challenge this law and take it to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible to get this thing struck down. Curious what you think about all this. Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps as well. And please pray that we do not get that. Pope Fernandez, maybe? He posed as pious as he could on the Mass. Yeah. John Dolan does warn us, never rely on the Supreme Court to do the right thing. This is true. Don't rely on the Supreme Court to do the right thing. There's at least one of the conservatives and Catholic members who is not reliable on these things at all, Miss Barrett. But please pray that they do the most basic right thing. This should get overturned 9-0 because it's so blatant. I'm curious, though. Again, what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments, please. Again, hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. Sharing this on social media helps too. If you ever thought about supporting the work we do here, return to tradition through Patreon. The join button below, subscribe star, and all the other options. It does help keep these daily messages coming. It is greatly appreciated. And pray for the church and for the College of Cardinals at this time. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.